Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I am here with Carmen Rosas, Esquire. Hi, Carmen.
Hi, Darla. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so glad we could finally do this, and I can't wait to share you with people. How are
Thank
you?
you. Yes, I'm so excited.
So, let me just share a little bit about Carmen. She is a mother anthropologist, attorney, author, and founder of Rewild 2, a transformational company that empowers women to create and protect the lives they're building. So I'm so excited to talk about this. Her approach is both practical and intuitive, using legal tools, financial wisdom, and emotional wellness to build a sustainable future. Carmen's work has been seen on Forbes, HuffPost, Modern Latina, and more. As a speaker, she has also led international retreats, workshops, and motivational talks, including a leadership, that's a good word to get right, leadership talk at Stanford University for over 200 women. So, welcome. And Carmen, what I love so much is being a lawyer. Like, you could really easily put yourself in a box. And I have had clients who are lawyers who felt that way, like I have to show up a certain way and do my work in a certain way. And you built something really successful, and then you took a step back and said, okay, and then how do I serve even deeper?
Mhm.
So first, just take us back and tell us a little bit about your journey to become an attorney and how you settled into estate work.
So I became an attorney 12 years ago, but obviously my journey started before that. I was the first in my family to go to college. I'm the only attorney in my family. And when I say family, it's like extended eight. And my dad comes from a family of eight. My mom comes from a family of four. So out of all of our family, both sides, first to go to college, and I'm the only attorney. And I kind of just fell into law because I was studying anthropology in college and I loved it, loved studying different cultures, and had always been very connected to my Mexican roots. As much as my dad had tried to push us to assimilate, I was like, but I really love this,
Mm.
part of us and didn't want to lose it. But so I started studying anthropology, got to my junior year, and they're like, well, what are you going to do for work? And I was like, that's a great question. So there was a law and society emphasis where we studied tribal systems in New Zealand as compared to the US legal system. And I said, well, shoot, I'll just go to law school because I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up yet. And so I applied to law school, went to law school, tried dropping out twice because I was like, I just don't want to be here. I knew I didn't fit in, not only because I'm brown, right? Because the color of my skin and my upbringing, but also because I was like, not, I don't want to say as competitive, but my personality just didn't mesh with
Mm.
the other people who were in law school. And so tried dropping out twice. I wanted to go into interior design or marketing, and I love just more of a creative, area. But I am the oldest of three, the only girl, and I had committed to my dad that I would become a lawyer. And so at that point, I was like, I put myself into this box at that point voluntarily, and I didn't feel like I could disappoint him. And so I finished law school. I was studying for the bar exam. And originally, I thought I was going to go into family law, do divorce and custody, because while I was in school, I went to school at night and I worked full time, but I was able to work at a nonprofit that helped low income and underserved families, but primarily women whose husbands decided to freeze their bank accounts to take all the money because they were stay at home moms. And so basically had to ask for allowance, right? So they were not financially empowered. And I was like, I love that I get to help these women take
Yeah.
back what's theirs because they contributed in a different way. And then when I was getting ready to go into private practice before I was waiting for bar results, my grandmother passed away. And my grandmother had gotten these DIY documents off the internet. And the same grandmother was like forging signatures from city council members telling people to slow down and they were putting in speed bumps. So I was like, okay, she kind of knew what she was doing, right? She had that idea. She was very involved with like, city politics, if we'll say. And so she did like these DIY things. And For the most part, they were fine, but she never actually funded her trust, which means that she actually actually put anything into her trust name, and so she had
So she
named
got part of it right, but
she got
part
part
of
of it
it
right,
wrong.
but didn't know that there was another step that had to
Got
happen,
it.
right? Because she was DIYing it. She didn't have like a professional that she was consulting with and just didn't know. And so she got part of it right, which is great. She had named my mom. She was leaving everything to my mom because my other aunts had moved away, and my grandmother, was very upset that they didn't come back and check on her. They didn't do anything to kind of see how she was in her older years. And so she had left everything to my mom, but she basically left an empty box, right? So I like to say a trust is like a treasure box. So she left this empty box for my mom, but there was this house that sat outside of it. And so at that time, I was working with the law firm that did custody and estate planning. And I presented this information to the attorney. He said, "Hey, I'll tell you what, I'll mentor you through this if you do all the work." And I said, "Yes." So basically, I paid for attorney's fees in work, but also learning this.
Mm.
And during that time, and it was pretty straightforward, right? Because I was already familiar with court documents and legalese and this, language that many people are not. My mom was having a lot of like emotional, I don't want to say strife, but she was emotionally upset, right? Her mom had just died. She'd been caregiving for my grandmother for quite a few years before that. It was her best friend. And now she had to deal with this legal mumbo jumbo, right? This legal jargon that she had no idea what to do. And I sat back and I was like, there are so many families that have no idea. They don't have someone who just took the bar exam and went to law school, right? They don't have somebody who understands that language, which means that it's like double the amount of like trauma, right? We'll say, or, emotion that comes up because now they're stressed and they don't know what to do and they have to fork over a ton of money to figure this out. And so at that point, I was like, I'll do family law and custody and estate planning, right? I will do both of them within 6 months of starting my business, because I started my business as soon as I got my results and license. And within 6 months, I quit family law. And I was like, we're just doing estate planning. And then within about two years ish, I was coming up to 30 and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And I knew at that point, I didn't want to just create documents, right? Because estate planning is a lot of documents. Yes, I get to talk with clients, but it's just document preparation. And I was like, I'm helping people prepare for death, essentially, right? Like what happens if you die or there's an emergency? But what I really thought about and what I really wanted to do was help people think about how they were living their day-to-day life. How would their families remember them? What would they be known as, that they just were workaholics who never spent time like with their family, or, they like were short temper, how are they living their day-to-day life? And because my grandmother who passed always had dreams of going to Italy and Disneyland, two different places, but she never went because maybe it was finances. She just didn't know who she would go with, and things like that. And I, early on was like, I don't want to live my life with regrets or that I wasn't able to do certain things. And then as I was going through my own kind of personal development, spiritual journey, coming up to 30, I was like, give me a sign. And I was pregnant 6 months later. And then what led me to do even more coaching was the people who were giving me advice and they thought it was advice, right? Where they're like, you're going to have a kid, you're going to be a mom, your life is over. And I was like, hold that thought. No, it's not. I'm going to show my daughter what is possible for her. And so
Wow.
like that's the beginning of the journey. And my daughter's now 9 and I've been doing, I have my law practice still. It's 12 years old, but yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, I have like a few things I want to ask more
Yeah.
about. One of the things that I'm fascinated by that I just learned today about you is that you started in anthropology and this idea of the tribal systems in New Zealand compared to the legal system in the US. Yeah, I'm curious. I know how passionate you are about the communities you serve and like how did that early schooling influence your work today?
That's a great question. I mean, as we like move through, right, we see these glimmers and we're able to connect the dots. Like early on, I didn't connect the dots. It wasn't until about, okay, what are we, 2017, that somebody else actually connected the dots for me
Mm.
about how my family immigrated here, right? My dad came from Mexico. My great grandparents were from France and Italy on my mom's side. And we're not that many generations in, right? Like my dad was born there. I'm first gen on his side. And then they're like, and you were an anthropology major and you're so fascinated by different cultures. And I was like, oh, there's something here. And so it wasn't until
Yeah.
about 7 years ago that I like connected the dots, even though I graduated in 2005 with my anthropology degree. Yeah, it took me a little while. And I think part of it though was that I was just so set on like, this is the box that well, first, right, placed in by society based on cultural and societal expectations of women, and being an eldest daughter, like all of these things. And then it wasn't until, 2017 when I was already in my 30s that I realized, oh, I get to redefine everything that I ever thought I knew and do it more with purpose and serve the communities that I want.
Mm.
So it wasn't until 7 years ago that I actually connected the dots and realized, oh,
Yeah.
my life experience, right? Because as I mentioned, like I really loved, like when we were younger, I didn't learn Spanish until I was in high school. Because my dad didn't want to teach us when we were younger because he came here from Mexico, had an accent, and was
Yeah.
teased. And he wanted us to assimilate. He always wanted us to fit in and just look like everyone else, dress like everyone else. So he didn't want us to get teased about accents and how we said things. And now I'm one of very few attorneys in the whole country that actually speaks Spanish and does estate planning. And so I have clients who reach out from not only like San Diego, which is the southern part of California and the northern part of California, but like people in Massachusetts, right? Oregon, all different states where they're like,
Yeah.
how can we serve Spanish speaking communities even more? And so the thing that I loved early on and the culture that I loved, I now get to serve, but didn't
Yeah.
realize that was available to me until like 7 years ago. Well, that's not true. I probably started once I figured out, oh, culture is just the thing that I do and I love and I study,
Yes.
and fascinated by and love being immersed in. I was then able to kind of rewild myself and step into this like newer version that I get to create.
What do you think resonated for you about the Mexican culture and lineage that didn't resonate for your dad?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the first thing that's coming to mind, right, is well, it's my name, right? So I'm named after my grandmother. And
Mm.
I almost feel like part of it was that I was being rebellious, right? Like I just just knew early on where it was like it's one of those things, right, where they tried so hard not to keep it from us, but keep us from it
Yeah.
that I was like, I want to know more. Like that hunger was
Yeah.
like, the curiosity was there because he was so adamant about, we're not, we don't speak Spanish at home. We don't do this. You're going to dress like all of the other kids. I remember when I started high school and I was in a very prestigious high school in Atherton. Like I was going to school with Larry Ellison's son. Like those are the kids that were there. I was there as a affirmative action, I'm sure, and scholarship kid, right? Where there were like maybe 10 Black and brown kids at the school per grade, probably for the whole school. And I remember my dad was like, well, you can't dress like that. You can't, I always wore my hoops. I always had I had gelled, like crunchy hair and what people would call cholas, right? Like they very into that. And he's like, you can't wear baggy pants. You can't wear certain shoes. And so he took me to Abercrombie and Fitch to go get like sweaters and skirts. And I was like, what is this? Like, what am I wearing? And he's like, well, you have to
No.
like dress like them. You have to fit in. You have to like learn
Mm.
to play tennis and you have to learn to do these things. And I was like, I play soccer. I'm not quite sure like how this works, and I did it for like a couple weeks and I was like, I just cannot. And then I started wearing my hoop earrings that matched my clothes. And I mean, they thought it was the greatest thing ever, but I was like, this is what I'm comfortable in. And yeah, so the cost.
You can get a little glimpse of why rewilding is important to you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's, a lot of it is just being set in boxes, and not boxes that we've chosen for ourselves. Because that's a whole other topic, right? But it's
Yeah.
things that, society or our parents, the world has put us in.
So doing estate planning, I remember you talking about the practical pieces and the education and the things people don't know and which is vast. And then there's like the emotional pieces and how people want to be remembered is one piece, but what do they really care about? And are they living that way and making what matters to them a priority? And I know that's part of how you serve people. And I'm guessing when you started with estate planning and forms and filling stuff out, you didn't know that. So what was that process of, I'm going to call it your magic coming online, like
Mhm.
seeing beyond the question being asked into the deeper truth? How did that go for you?
Yeah, no, so definitely, right? It was, they have this like attorney in a box. I took that and I said, okay, let's do this. And that's why it was like, not even 2 full years where I was like, I cannot do this for the next 10 years. Like it wasn't fulfilling. It
Yeah.
was, it was like, I'm a generator and I was like, I need to do things that bring me joy. And I was like checking boxes, filling out
Mm,
the forms, being on the
mm,
computer doesn't work for me. And so when I started exploring and helping clients really think about, well, how do you want to be remembered? Um, and a lot of even in some of my marketing now, it's like, do you want to be remembered as the grandma who had all her stuff together or the grandma who left chaos and just didn't get the documents done? And
mm.
it's even parts of that, right? Where it goes into estate planning that way. But it goes deeper than that, right? Like when people get up and they're, reading your eulogy or they're writing your obituary, what do you want included in there? And so for me, because I was already on that journey for myself, I wanted to ask everybody, right? Because there are times where it's like, well, how are you distributing your assets? Do you have any important causes? And once I would get to that point, or I could ask them things like, tell me about your family and your dynamics, and some people be like, oh, I came here from another country and I worked so hard and I bought this house and I just want my kids to have a place to live and not be homeless, right? Whereas the kids are thinking, oh, how can I take that money and
Yeah.
use it to buy more property or reinvest it, right? But the story
Yeah.
behind it is so powerful, and it just tells me so much more about my clients rather than let's just fill out this form and
Yeah.
call it a day.
And have you had an example where, the parent is attached to it going a certain way and your magic or your soul, you have a knowing of like, that's
Mhm.
actually that's actually not going to help people, or maybe
Yeah.
you could spend some of that money, or like, have you had to surface things with your clients to consider that felt a little edgy or hard to talk about?
Yeah. Well, so for the Latin community already thinking about death, like, yes, we have Dia de los Muertos, but it's, you talk about death, that means you're calling it in, right? That you're attracting it. And some
Yeah.
of it, so there's so many stories where I'm thinking of one where I had to convince the client that creating this document didn't mean that she was calling in death, that she, it was like, I'm a child of God. And I said, yes, absolutely. But we live on earth and we have legal systems and laws and the courts and IRS, Uncle Sam don't care about your beliefs or your God, right? And then there's other times where they have this one house and they're like, I just want to, they can't sell it. They just want to, but it's not, they can't sell it because they want somebody to have like financial security, right? They don't want to sell it because of they know of all the sentimental things that have happened in that home, of the, experiences and just what they had to give and sacrifice essentially to purchase that
Yeah.
house. And so for them, it's like, well, I just want to keep it. It's not hoarding, right? But similar idea of that, right? Well, I just, I'm they're so attached to it. And I was like, you're going to leave and you need to decide what's going to happen with it. And they're like, oh, well, the kids can figure it out. And the kids are going to fight because the truth is, when you're gone, the kids' real thoughts of each other and, their experiences with each other growing up and the resentment comes to
Yeah.
fruition. And there's no more mom or dad that's going to be there to kind of keep them civil with each other.
Mm.
And another one is they're like, oh, well, I have like my 4 kids. I want all 4 kids to be trustee or to manage it. And I said, that is a bad idea. And so then I have to guide them through, okay, tell me about each of your children. who is the best at managing finance? Who is the most level-headed? Who gets upset when things don't go their way? And then we can kind of navigate who
Mm,
might be the best person for certain roles, because you have the person managing the money, and then you also have the people
yeah.
or the person who's going to manage medical decisions, right? And cremation and burial and all of those things. So
If we think about those questions, like which of your kids, or tell me about them, how do you get a knowing when they're talking of like, oh,
oh,
this is the one?
I get a knowing, and I can also tell when they're not telling me something, right? So I
Uh-huh.
remember I was like, okay, so tell me. And they're like, well, I want it to go this way. And I'll like pause and I said, tell me your hesitation. And they'll look at me like, and I'm like, well, why is it that you're feeling, X, Y, and Z, like anxious or, sad or, whatever it is. And a lot of times, sometimes they have a child who is not good with money, substance abuse user or something of that nature, right? Where they can't trust them, but they want them to be quote unquote, like just like all the other kids, right? Or like
Yeah.
normal or whatever, where they can manage their finances on their own, but the reality is they can't. But sometimes it's just the anxiety around even creating this. And so sometimes I end up just kind of having conversations about like, tell me what you're feeling. And then I can kind of
Mhm.
navigate the next right question, or how do we get the answers that we need.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How do you know in you, like, what's it feel like when you know they're not telling you something? Like, do
I
you
can
feel
feel
it in
like
your
I feel
body, or
it.
it's like
Yeah, I feel it here. Sometimes like I feel like it's hard for like I almost feel like I have anxiety. I take on the feeling
yeah,
and in my body, right? And I'm like, "Oh, something's not right." Or even if
yeah,
clients call in and we're on the phone and something seems a little off, right? Oh, my 99-year-old dad, and we have three, there's three of us, but we're just leaving everything to me. Just from like standard fact pattern, right? Something's funny going on. But then you ask more questions and I can sense, oh, no, this is not going to work. Or I have thinking of this little old lady who called in, and she just needed somebody to vent to, because one son wanted to sell her house and put her into an old person's home, and the other one wanted to rent it out while she was still living in it. And she was like, I just want to die already. And I was like, oh, this poor woman, this is not a way to live, right? But it's
yeah,
typically just feeling it in my body, and I can get
yeah.
those same emotions. Yeah.
That's sensation magic in my world.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
That makes me feel curious because those are some hard conversations to be in. So
Yeah.
going from like, oh, I'm just doing papers to now I'm like in these maybe challenging and resistant conversations. And maybe some people use it as an opportunity to transform and
Mhm.
like really grow into living, being really alive. Um, Anything you've learned about discerning like which clients to work with and
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that, right? So part of why I started like the rewilding was because people who were coming to me directly just for law firm stuff were not the same people that wanted this transformation or wanted to experience
Mhm.
more. Sometimes I do have clients that are like, "Oh, tell me more about this stuff that, oh, do you coach people, or, just
Yeah,
money mindset stuff that we go through during questions." And so I've had people kind of move into the rewilding and want to explore more. But for the most part, people who come directly for just estate planning documents, right? I ask the questions and they get that little piece of peace of mind and relief
yeah,
in being able to express it, but many of them are not ready for that like full transformation. And that's okay. But I get to share a little bit of my magic with those people who wouldn't have
yeah.
experienced it otherwise.
So talk about the invention of rewilding.
Yeah, so it was one of these things where I was like so much focused on, so just kind of more story, right? So I started my law practice, began coaching in 2017, around the same time where I connected the dots for
Yeah.
anthropology. Began coaching in 2017 after leaving a DV relationship, and was like, initially, my coaching started as I want to teach women legal and financial tools so they can remove themselves from domestic violence situations, because I was fortunate to know legal language. I was fortunate to have the financial resources to leave a relationship like that. But many times people stay because they can't. And so what started out as, like I was going to, help kind of guide women, and I was going to do a nonprofit and all these things, ended up being, I was meeting more and more moms who had those same stories. You have to be this smarter. You have to give up your whole life to be a mom. And as I
Mm.
shared my journey, they're like, tell me more. And so it kind of evolved into this mix of how do we be the women we want to be or that we were before society domesticated us, essentially.
Mm.
And what does that look like? How do we, decolonize wealth so that it's something that is available and normal for marginalized communities? And as I went through kind of all of this and just my own studying, because I love research, right? I just go down the rabbit hole of it all. I came across this and it was just like, I just want to rewild myself. And, there's memes and people jokes, like, I just want to run under the moon naked and howl,
Uh-huh.
howl under the moon with the wolves and just do all of the things. And there's so much, I think, still, right? Probably not with those listening, but the stigma is oh, you're too woo for me, or, and so I struggled for a long time trying to balance it out. And I finally was able to kind of figure out how I could balance it and tapping more into my own magic, know who I'm going to present certain things to in certain ways.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people are like, well, you're not showing up as your authentic self. And it's the opposite actually, right? Like I am showing up. I'm just discerning who is actually going to be open to listening and
Mm.
hearing what I have to share. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how we went.
Wait, because that's so juicy. It's so juicy. There is a discernment, right? Like so often, I work with people who their magic got shut down at some point when they were younger. They said things and then they were told, you don't say that, or how could you know that? Or, you're too much, you're too intense, you're too, all of that, and shut it down. And then, really want to reclaim it. And there's a truth that not everybody gets your magic,
Mhm.
right? And so, yeah, what was your journey to knowing, how do you know where to
I
give it,
turned
where
40.
to
No, 40 and just didn't care. No, no, it happened before that. I think it's, part of it is understanding yourself, right? And so a lot of rewilding is reconnecting with your true essence. What are your core values? Getting out into nature, away from the
Mm,
screens, getting
yeah,
sunshine, drinking water, just nourishing your body and really reconnecting with Mother Earth. And that helps you tap more into your innate,
yeah,
your nature. And so I started just doing more of that, and I was able to say, okay, it's okay that not everybody's going to get me. I'm not going to
yeah.
take it personally anymore, because as you know, right, in the coaching space we have to meet people where they're at, because if we try to push them
Yes.
beyond where they're comfortable, it's not going to resonate. They're not going to make any progress, and they're not going to be able to move forward in the way that we can truly help.
Mm,
And so we have to meet them where they're at. And so it's taking meet them where they're at a whole other level, right? Like I remember I had one client come in. She came in with her husband and we connected instantly. She was in her 40s, Latina. And she was like, tell me more about the work that you're doing. I think she had Googled me. And so my book
nice.
came up, my podcast, everything came up. And she was like, what is this amazing work? And I was like, oh, you are. And so I knew then, right? I could share my woo-woo-ness about how I
Yes.
stage the office before clients come in or after they leave, especially with funky energy, right? And so I could share those things with her, and money stories and beliefs around wealth. And so a lot of it is just this tapping into your inner knowing then allows you to figure out, you know what, I'm not going to, and it's not waste my time, right? Because I don't want it to
Yeah.
come off that way, but I'm just going to not share this part of me, because the other part is if we try to push what we know and we believe in onto somebody that we know is not going to accept it, we are causing more rejection, right? And traumas, which can then trigger past traumas from when we were children. And it's so once we know enough that it's not me, it's them, and they're just not in that space, it makes it so much easier. And then when you share with the people who get it, it's even more amazing. And
Yes.
you're like saving those little bits and pieces of yourself for the
Mhm.
people that are just going to get it, if that makes
So
sense.
good. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's like, specifically if we're bringing a truth, whether it's our truth or there's an energy of truth, and truth is transformative. And if we're bringing it to somewhere where someone's really not committed, like a lot of people have created, I mean, most people, right? Until we wake up, like we've created a whole life to avoid
Mhm.
the
Feeling
truth.
all the things. Yeah.
Yes.
You're like, I'm
Yes.
good where I'm at. I don't want to know that. Don't bring it to my attention. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. So you talked about retreat. So
Mhm.
what does retreat look like for Carmen?
I'm so exciting. So we actually have a retreat coming up in Bali in like 2 weeks, which I'm thrilled about. I love going on retreats, but also hosting them. And really, I think, I'm trying to think, 90% of the women on that will be at the retreat are moms. And when I ask why now, why this, like, what do you hope to
Yeah.
gain? And so much of it is, I just want time for myself. I want to be able to commit time to myself, but so we'll be in Bali. We'll get to experience a lot of like the cultural stuff. I have a girlfriend who actually lives out there. She married a
Nice.
Balinese man. She's from Washington originally. And so she helps connect and coordinate everything there. But the special thing about it is that we actually get to get more immersed into like Balinese culture and the people that live there,
Mhm.
not just the tourist things, which is the
Yeah.
anthropologist in me, right? Of course, I'm like, we need more than just the tourist things. But then we get to go and do the deep dive where they have time away from like everyday activities, and they get to explore, how do I want to be remembered, right? Because you can journal about it, but then you're like, oh, gotta get the kids to school, right? Or if I'm not up early enough and I skip my day, but this will be like space and time just dedicated to their transformation and growth, which I'm super excited about.
That's amazing. I love that you're bringing the cultural immersion back. And I love travel and experiencing other cultures. And I think you may know this, but last summer I went to Scandinavia, which is my heritage, to see like, oh, do I have resonance here? And what does it feel like? And what did the witchy people of my community do
Yeah.
back in the day? And so I love that so much. And I'm wondering, I feel like I want to go back to, like, based on your study of culture and anthropology, what do you wish, like, if you had a magic wand for American society, what would you wish for? What would you want us to pick up that maybe other cultures have, right? Or,
Yeah, in other cultures, community is so big. And we don't have that here.
yeah.
Like, and I think that that's why so many people still crave, like, and especially then the pandemic hit, right? And isolation,
Yeah.
and everyone became more just kind of focused on not getting sick. And so it's readopting that community. Well, so much of it, right, is like community collaboration, the
Yeah.
connectedness that you find in like village settings, right? Like, even if we're looking at the tribal system in New Zealand, it's all community, village based. They have a leader, but there's just conversations that are happening where there is maybe one person that decides, versus the US legal system, which is very like rigid. And are there loopholes? Yes, absolutely. Right. But sometimes it's not just, and it's targeted towards, and people who have different skin color don't tend to get the same, um, what is the word I'm looking for? I swear my brain sometimes goes from English to Spanish and
Mm.
I can't think it either. But it's
You can
the,
bring in Spanish.
yeah, it's like, it's the, well, then this is one of those moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm even trying to say, but they don't get the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
Because of skin color. And so just being more open to community, because we have different, and this is a tough time in our nation with the elections coming up and whatnot, but it's thinking about every American, unless you're a Native American, right? immigrated here.
Yes.
They were not from here. This is my country. And we could get into the ins and outs of that. But
Yeah.
it's, even you, right?
Hmm.
Scandinavian culture, you have different things and your family and ancestors experience different things. And just, it's like teaching more tolerance and being more open. And, I know I'm probably sounding like, oh, everybody would just be like, kumbaya. But the reality is if we were more tolerant and more open and being curious about what people's experiences were like and being in community and having those conversations, it would be so much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. I'm thinking of even, a lot of my trauma was in my family,
Mhm.
right? And my expression wasn't received. And I'm thinking of you with your hoop earrings and your baggy jeans and wanting to go to school. And like my perception is in a lot of tribal cultures, there's an honoring of the soul of the child that is nurtured and people get curious about, oh, who is this?
Yeah.
Who is this little human going to become? And I didn't experience any of that. It sounds like you didn't get a lot of that.
No, not at all. It was like, I felt like from the moment I was born, and it's one of those things where I don't have a lot of memories, but it was like my validation and my love came when I got good grades in school. And I was
Yeah.
like, look how well I did. And so for me, it was do well in school. You have to go to school. Obviously, now I know that like being educated is a privilege compared to other countries, right? I
Yeah.
shared that we were in Guatemala and these kids just like are so excited they get to go to school
Yes.
because not everybody is able to,
Mhm.
right? They have to go and they work, or they have, like, we were building a school because it's only a 30-minute walk uphill versus an hour and a half to the other
Yeah.
school that was down the street. And so because of that, younger kids can't go and experience that. And so
Right.
I get that now that I'm educated and I have that privilege to say, oh, well, if my daughter doesn't want to go to college, she doesn't have to. No, she doesn't. But I would encourage her to still do it because we're in a country where
But
it's
she
available
can.
to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with community colleges being free, at least in California now, there's no reason for people to not get an education and take
Yeah.
advantage of that. But my point in saying is that, right, I was taught early on, you have to go to school, you have to get educated. But that was because my grandparents and my dad coming from Mexico, it was not available to them the
Yeah.
way it is here. Yeah. So I don't know where I was going with that, but that's the message that I'm here to share.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know exactly how we get back to that balance, right? It's, for me, sourced, my work is really about being able to be the unique soul you are and follow your own guidance. And um, the more adults are doing that, the more they make space for their kids to be that way and break
Yeah.
some of the patterns.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my daughter who's 9 and I'm just like, you have it so much better, so much better in different ways, right, than
Yeah.
I did. But she has the ability to kind of like explore new things and decide what she wanted to do. Like, fun fact, I was an ice skater until I was 11. And it wasn't until I was 11 that I felt confident enough to tell my dad I didn't want to ice skate because I wasn't allowed to quit before then. And I did it competitively. And so I mean, Christy Yamaguchi was huge at that at that
Yeah.
time, right? And so it's like, well, what athletes do you see on TV? I wasn't going to play football or basketball, but I was an ice skater, and then at that point, I went into soccer. But
Mm-hmm.
she has the opportunity now, right? So as
Yeah.
parents raising, or even like aunts, right,
Yeah.
uncles, who are these guides in these
Yeah.
children's life, right? There's a reason why they are in front of us. How can we guide them to be okay not being part of the pack, right? Being the lone wolf or being
Yeah.
the leader and exploring what makes them excited, even if the rest of the class doesn't like it or they think it's dumb or they think it's silly. Helping
Yes.
you encourage their curiosity and independence, I guess, or independent thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so Rewilding Your Mind is an ebook that
Mhm.
you've created. What can people expect from that? We'll put the link below.
Yeah, so it's just something that I put together because I realize, as I mentioned, getting out into nature, well, rest, right, is like this form of resistance where there's the badge of you always have to hustle, you have to grind, you always have to be doing. And it's still something that I struggle with regularly. But I find if I get outdoors in nature,
Yeah.
I'm also able to give myself permission to rest a little, right? That there doesn't have to be a purpose behind your nap or just downtime, right? And that it's okay and giving yourself permission. But the rest, getting out into nature, just those two things can help you reconnect with who you are, right? Can help you reconnect with the magic that's in there. And it's just really kind of like dipping your toes in the water to see like what it would be like to step into that person, right? Or just getting curious about who that person is. And yeah, so it's just helping you go a little bit deeper. And a lot of it is, right, for people who are kind of at their beginning of their journey, where they're like, I know this stuff exists, but I've never really like tapped into it or dipped my toes into it. I mean, obviously people who've been kind of on this journey for a few years can also benefit from it, but it really is kind of this like beginners, like let's get you started and into this journey of and path back to yourself.
Path back to yourself. I love that. I didn't, I think I have an idea of being wild, being like really just trusting yourself and walking your own path. And I don't think I knew that nature was such a component for
Yeah.
you. And I don't, somehow based on what you told me about your dad, I'm guessing he wasn't like a big nature person.
No, yeah.
Like you didn't grow up going out, you
No,
probably
no, not
enjoying the
well.
finer things in life that you
And you
could.
know what? No, and it's funny because I have a cousin and she'll joke because we used to like, we would go out right in college and then I would be up in the morning and she was like, oh, there goes Carmen going for a hike again. And it's one of those things where it's like, I knew that I felt refreshed, regenerated if I was out in
Yeah.
nature in sunshine. And sometimes, right, when I'm like feeling overwhelmed or anxious, I'm like, what would feel like love for my body right now? And it's literally sitting out in my little egg chair in the sun and just like
Yes.
taking it all in. And I did experience burnout a couple years ago. I went through a coaching program, I think I've shared with you, and I was burnt out. I was not myself, went through a depression, or I thought it was depression. And the thing that like pulled me out of that was getting out into nature, pausing, getting away from the screens and the work and all the things that I thought I had to do. And it was going on walks in my neighborhood, listening to the birds and doing this like walking meditation of sorts where I'm like recognizing the sounds around me that I wouldn't if I was, at home behind my computer drafting documents. So,
What
yeah.
would feel good to my body right now? Or what would feel like love to my body
Yeah.
right now? That's such a good question.
Yeah. That's what I ask myself a lot. Like even when I'm hungry and I'm like, what am I feeling right now? Like what would feel like love? And sometimes it's just like drink a glass of water. Like that will your body will thank
Yeah.
you, right? But really just being able to check in that way and getting to know yourself
Yeah.
is amazing.
Well, and I heard so much sensation magic in how you know what you know. And so sensation magic can't be trapped behind a computer screen. Like you just can't, it's like so not aligned with how our culture is right now. You've got to move,
Yeah.
nurture. So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to end with one question, but I'm going to ask two.
Okay.
Because we have the benefit of having an attorney who knows a lot of things. So, what advice would you have to someone who, most of our audience is likely entrepreneurial, whether they're doing it or not, who's built some wealth, maybe like they think it's not enough to protect or do anything with, but or it's not time yet to be thinking about death or retirement. What advice would you have for that person based on mistakes you've seen people make?
Yeah, that's such a great one, right? It's start now. I know people are like, I'm in my late 30s, I'm in my 40s, and I'm still too young. Like, I'm not going to die. I have a long time, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, we don't know what will happen tomorrow, as cliche as that is, right? I could leave here on my way to pick my daughter up and get hit by a car, knock on wood. That doesn't happen, but anything can happen. I could have a heart attack thinking I'm like so healthy, right? We don't know what
Yeah.
will happen. And so estate planning is more than just wealth. One is that it does healthcare decisions, like who will make those decisions for you if you're incapacitated or cannot make them for yourself. It's about finances. Who will make sure that, if you're a parent, that your kids are
Yeah.
taken care of, that the money is going to be managed properly, that your ex doesn't get it. All of these things like updating beneficiary forms, that's considered estate planning. But really the trust part, creating this trust, creating this treasure box, and people may be like, I only have like $50,000 in retirement, or I only have, X, Y, and Z. The thing I get the
Yeah.
most is I only have my little house. Well, your little house here in Silicon Valley is $1.2 million. And, the state is looking at fair market value. So it may not feel like a lot to you because you're not where you want to be yet financially,
Yeah.
because you feel like
Mm.
you're behind, because you have all these money stories. But the reality is, Uncle Sam, the IRS and the state would love to take any little bit that you have. So why not be intentional about it and make sure that it goes to the places or the people or organizations that you want it to? So I say start now, no matter where you're at. And the other thing is too, right? When you create this treasure box, and it may be empty right now, or maybe has your $50 that's left over every month from, after all your bills are paid, but that $50 can then be invested. It'll be this little snowball that grows and gets bigger, or it's like more and more coins that fill up this box. But having that and knowing that you're working toward actually provides a mindset shift, that says, hey, I have this and I'm building it and I want to make it, I want to fill it up, which means
Yeah.
that your mindset around like wealth building changes. And when we look at wealth building versus, your core values, right? When we're looking at, oh, do I want to invest in the stock market, or do I want to take this trip and invest in myself and do this amazing coaching retreat, right? It allows you to better decide where your money's going, based on your core values, based on your goals. And I'm also a futurist. So one of my strengths is future planning. And so for me, I'm always thinking about the
Mm.
future. And if you're not that person, right, if you can just figure out your core values and your ultimate goals, it'll help you move in that direction more than you would kind of just winging it.
So good. And are you also, so I know when they get the ebook, they'll get on your list and learn about your retreats and everything. Are you also available for new clients in estate planning?
Yeah, so the great question I get all the time is, oh, can you only do California? So the law firm can only do California, but I can be a consultant and can assist with our Done With You. It's called Her Legacy Now, estate planning documents. And so basically, it's a course that we have that walks people through how to get their estate plan done with DIY documents, and then it's reviewed by an attorney. You get 30 minutes with an attorney to make sure that it's all done properly. And we have a huge network of attorneys in other states, to speak with them if they want to do more one-on-one comprehensive stuff. But if they're at the beginning stage, I'm like, I don't have a lot, but I want to do this and I want to get
Yeah.
started. We can definitely help with that through Her Legacy Now. And then the law firm is always taking on new clients in California, and that can
Okay.
be San Diego past Sacramento, right? So the whole
Yeah.
state. Yeah. And then so they'll get, and they'll get tips and things like that around like money mindset. So it's not just values and
Yeah.
rewilding kind of your whole mind, but it's all, I mean, yourself, but it's like your whole mind, how you think about
Mm.
money, how you think about wealth. And we have lots of different resources.
Nice. And her legacy now is in English and Spanish. Yes.
Her legacy now is currently only in English, but
Okay.
we are offering workshops in Spanish, and our webinar is in Spanish. And so if there's just more information that's wanted, we're in the process of translating everything. And
Okay.
the catch is the DIY documents. All documents need to be in English
Yeah.
because they're legal documents, but
Right.
we're working on re-recording the videos in Spanish right now.
Okay. I'm picturing an AI Carmen speaking Spanish over the.
I mean, that is actually not a bad
I bet
idea,
that could
because trying to
happen.
get me to record videos and stay, my big vision brain is like all these things, and it's, execution is
Uh-huh.
definitely not my strong suit, but I have an amazing team that works with me that kind of is like, let's bring it back down just for a little bit and then you can go back out.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, last piece for real. Someone who's home alone. Well, I don't want to say they're home alone. Someone who's listening to this
Yeah.
and they're in their environment, and maybe they are the only magical person in their family, in their job, in their
I
career,
can relate. Mhm.
and they hear this. What message would you have for them?
Ah. It's just keep showing up for yourself, is really what it comes down to, because I am like that. I mean, I'm guiding my daughter, right, to be that
Yeah.
person. My mom now has become more interested in what her magic is like. And honestly, if you just keep showing up, as yourself and in your magic, people around you then feel like they have the permission to do the same. And so it may be like that for a little while, but I see it with my mom. I see it with girlfriends where I was always like, oh, they have, this, I don't share my magic with them, but they see me online or they see the glimpses of me and they now are like, because of you and just seeing how you live your life, I feel like I have permission to do that. Where we're not having full on conversations about what crystal do you have in your bra, right? Or what's, what are you burning today? They are just able to also experience your energy and your magic. So they're able to, and I don't know if it's vibration or sensation, you tell me, Darla, but they're able to feel that energy that
Yes.
you're exuding as long as you are in your magic. So keep showing up.
Love it. Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and energy, and I look forward to seeing the comments we get. Go check out the ebook. Don't forget to grab that, make a note, and the link is below this video.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thank you, Carmen.
Bye.
Bye.